All right. Like I mentioned before, you just got to live on the air. You know what I'm saying? Like if life doesn't stop just because the camera's rolling. Your boy can't breathe out of his nostrils, hence the mouth breathing. Ah. All right. Jambe Ala, our friend in the back, one Danny Segura. There he is. How are you, my friend?
I'm good. Can I just say, how shitty must it feel? Like, you go to your jiu-jitsu tournament, you go look at the bracket, blue belt division,
blue
maybe
belt.
purple.
Blue belt, yeah.
Blue belt. Ed Ruth.
And it's Ed Ruth.
Jesus
one of the
Christ.
10 best wrestlers ever in college.
I will just not show up. I'll take the forfeit.
Which, by the way, in jiu-jitsu is not that big a deal. People do it all the time. They call it closing out. All right. We have put the number up. It's always 844-866-2468. Or for our international impoverished listeners, you can use the MMA Hour at voxmedia.com, right? I got it right.
Yep.
They can send their MP3s there, make them short, make them fast, get in, get out. Yes. How are the calls today? You told me at the beginning of the show, Danny, that these calls are just another level. Is that right?
Yeah, man. We had so many calls that there was a lot of good ones that we're not going to be able to feature just because there were so many.
Okay.
And there was also a lot asking about the next UFC fight card. So I try to stay away from those because we'll probably get into those the next show. So,
okay.
Yeah, but we did get a lot of different type of calls just because there was no UFC event this weekend. So there was no exact theme to talk about.
Okay.
So let's get started. The first one is Conor McGregor.
Of course.
Hi, this is David from Kitchener, Ontario, Canada. Question about the Khabib-Conor fight. Do people not remember how Khabib looked against Michael Johnson? Johnson picked him apart with his stand-up on the feet, made it look easy, and almost finished him at one point. Now, McGregor is 1,000 times better than Johnson, so isn't he just going to starch him in one punch right off the bat? How is no one talking about this? We have pure proof of how Khabib performs against a striker, and Johnson is no McGregor. Not enough hype about this. I have McGregor winning this easy. Just want your thoughts on why this isn't being more hyped up.
Okay.
Okay, so before
Let me say this. I appreciate the question. Boy, what a bad question.
Well, before we get into this, I think this guy's a Conor McGregor fan.
Which is fine. There's no problem being a Conor McGregor fan.
And also, I would like to add, this is not really a question. It's more of an opinion. You can call. You don't necessarily have to have a question for us. You can just call and state your opinion.
Yeah, or you
and
can
we
call
can debate it.
And you can call in and say I was wrong about something, which, by the way, is both has happened and will happen. So yeah, it doesn't have to be a question. You can be like, Luke, you said X. X is clearly wrong. What do you say now? You know?
Yeah, exactly. So. I do think there's some things off with this question in the sense of I don't think Michael Johnson destroyed Khabib on the feet.
Nearly
but he
finished
did
him.
have some. Yeah, I don't know about
insane.
that.
Also,
but he did tag him up a couple times.
Right, well, there's just a couple problems with the question. Number one, he didn't nearly finish him. That's a problem.
That's not true.
Number two, there's a lot of questions you have to ask yourself. Well, what he goes? Well, we've seen how Khabib has done against a striker. Well, what kind of striker?
Right.
A Michael Johnson striker, or Edson Barboza striker? Those are two strikers. They're very different kinds of strikers, and he had a variety of success against both. By the way, heads up, he won the Michael Johnson fight and he finished him. So look, there's also that to be taken into account. So when you talk about a striker, there's no such thing as a striker. What kinds of striker? What kinds of strikes do they throw? By the way, what kind of approach does he take? I spoke to Javier Mendez after that fight, and he was like, yeah, we're not going to do that with Conor. I mean, it seems to me like their plan is they want to close the distance immediately, and then from there find just the right entry. They want to stand as much as they need to and not a second more. Now, however long that ends up being, I don't know. Yeah. Now, to the caller's point, I said it was a bad question. I'm not trying to be mean. Here's my point. He says Conor can knock him out in one punch. Did I think Conor was going to beat Aldo that way? I never in a million years saw him. Who did? One punch KO? No one saw that, but it did happen. Conor has incredible accuracy, fantastic power, good vision, long use of his limbs. He's a phenomenal talent. So I've made this point before. I think overall, if you're evaluating the skill sets in their history, I tend to favor Khabib, but it's just a degree of probability. People want to make it like, oh, I'm saying Khabib's going to win. That's the only option. No, it's just probability. I don't really know what's going to happen. And by the way, I don't think it's an overwhelming probability. But even if it's, let's say, 55% in Khabib's favor, that could be Khabib barely winning inside that 55. That could be Khabib thrashing him. And inside the 45, that could be Conor barely winning. That could be Conor putting his lights out in one shot. I just think overall, Danny, I ever so slightly lean towards Khabib.
You know what? And one of the reasons why I picked this call is because I'm leaning towards Conor McGregor.
Okay.
Yep.
I can't really argue with it, but
I view it the same as I would probably give 45 to Khabib and 55 to McGregor.
Yep.
But man, I don't know. There is something to be said. Some strikers have had some success.
Sure.
Against Khabib.
Sure.
And we know Conor McGregor just needs a small window to capitalize on that.
You know what? Here's what I like about this fight, Danny. If you're a Khabib fan, I think you should be nervous. If you're a Conor fan, I think you should be nervous.
Yep.
And that's why I'm like, oh, Khabib's gonna win. I don't really know, to be quite honest with you. And there's been times where I thought guys would be competitive with Conor. And dude, here's the thing about Conor. Not that Khabib is not.
Yeah.
But Conor on game day, bro, he is bottom of the ninth, game 7. He is intense, ready to go, always locked on. He is a competitor's competitor. Yep. So you have to count that too.
And he always shows up. We know some guys sometimes be like, oh no, this fight I had the rough first round. I couldn't get I couldn't find myself, whatever. Conor never has that issue. He makes sure whether he's injured or not, he shows up and he finds a way.
Sure.
He's always on point.
But again, I want to be clear. It is entirely possible that Conor goes in there and KOs him in 60 seconds.
You know, that's what I'm feeling.
Okay.
Maybe not 60 seconds, but...
Okay, that is entirely possible.
Yeah.
But I still believe the appropriate rational response is, and I realize that fans of either side are, by definition, irrational. That's what it means to be a fan, a fanatic. I'm just saying, to me, the appropriate response is, you can pick who you like, but you should weigh, neither of these guys are chumps.
Yep.
They don't have a ton of liabilities. Conor does not lose all that easily, and by the way, Khabib's never lost. So take their strengths quite seriously.
I 100% acknowledge it can go either way, but leaning towards McGregor.
All right, this will be fun then.
Yeah. So let's keep the McGregor train rolling and let's discuss his future.
Okay.
Hey, yo, this Manny Laggy Lags. My question is, if McGregor comes back, win or lose, what is he doing after the fight with Khabib?
All right, so quick shout out to Manny Laggy Lag, right? That's what he said.
That's a real name,
I suppose, or maybe that's just his I don't know, Twitter persona,
his
maybe
street alias.
Yes. So Conor McGregor defeats Khabib Nurmagomedov.
Mm-hmm.
Where does he go next?
Conor, I don't see how they don't do a GSP fight, and I know that there's some kind of complications in there. We've discussed it. We talked about it last week in the MMA Beat. I just what's he gonna? I mean, I guess you could do the Nate Diaz fight, right? If Nate doesn't lose to Dustin. How on earth is Conor going to fight Nate if Nate loses to Dustin? Now, I'm not predicting that necessarily. I'm just saying, if we're talking about contingencies and hypotheticals, how do you – because remember, Chuck Mindenhall's always made a great point about Conor. What's his career been about? Escalation. Mm-hmm. Yeah? How do you escalate after you beat the UFC lightweight champ who's undefeated? Not a lot of places you can go.
Yeah. Somebody made this point to me on Twitter once. I forgot who, but – they said Conor McGregor's not a king, he's a conqueror, which is the perfect way to describe him. He doesn't reign over divisions. Mm-hmm. He's just out to get the next big thing.
He just pillages and moves on, yeah.
I think if he wins, I mean, if Nate Diaz manages to beat Dustin Poirier,
all bets are off.
I think it's likely.
Yeah.
You definitely getting a third one. Sure. Nate Diaz is fighting for the title next.
Now, what about if Conor loses?
Yeah, if Conor loses, that's where it gets tricky. I think that Nate Diaz fight is always going to be in the back burner. If he loses, they're definitely going to make the third one, and that's going to help him get back in the horse. Maybe after he beats him, maybe he has not an excuse, but enough reason to fight for the title.
Yeah, it was off for 2 years. Yeah. By the way, his fans understand that if he goes in there and gets mauled by Khabib, the right answer is, well, Khabib is just a mauler, okay? The right answer is not, and I'm sure ring rust plays a role, but a guy like Conor McGregor, who is just, as I mentioned before, my God, on game night, he is dialed in. The answer is not, well, there was just a bunch of ring rust and otherwise he would have won. I mean, maybe that's true, but it just seems to me like, well, no, one guy was competing and has just a skill set that he has matured over time that basically beats most other skill sets. That's really the answer there. It's not, do not find excuses where they don't exist, right? Unless he, in fact, is injured or something like that. But
and also, if he loses, like I can definitely see him getting that, Nate Diaz payday, and then even calling it quits. I mean, the guy's made tons of money.
Yep. Why? So, well, he has one kid, right? I think another one on the way or something like that. I've heard.
I think so. Yeah.
Either way, he's a father, and make a bunch of cash and be on your way. I get it
for sure. Let's talk about Mr. Diaz.
All right.
Hey, Luke. This is Aaron from Toronto in Canada, in case we have any donks on the line who don't know where that is.
We certainly
Believe
don't.
me, I've seen them. Anyways, my question is about the Diaz-Poirier fight. Sean Al-Shadi previously tweeted an idea that they should make the fight the main event in New York, and I must say I love the idea. Don't you think the UFC would get more pay-per-view buys if it went the route of promoting the crap out of Diaz on that card as being in the main event? You can make the pay-per-view poster, promos, and marketing all about him, and to support the card, you could put the strawweight belt on the line in the co-main event. The fans would benefit too, as it would make the fight 5 rounds. To me, putting Diaz and Poirier any lower on the card than the main event would be promotional malpractice. What do you guys think? Thanks again, and keep up the great work.
Now, that is a great call.
Yeah, that was
a great question.
Oh, man.
Well done.
Very clear.
Yep.
Well spoken.
Yep. Argued it. Okay.
Yep.
So let's get to some of the merits there. I disagree with my colleague, Sean Al-Shadi, in the following sense. If the UFC went about it and did it, it's not that I would cry about it, because Nate is probably going to end up actually being the biggest star on that card, unless the UFC can pull a rabbit out of a hat here. It's that I made this point last week too, man. I don't really feel like they know how to promote Diaz, to be honest with you. They keep putting him in these smaller roles or these sort of forgettable moments because I think in their mind, that's just kind of who he is. And he hasn't been able to break out of that yet to a degree sufficient to his own expectations. So it's like, well, the UFC should put him in there. Well, what does it tell you that they didn't put him in that role, right? In other words, in Sean's argument is, think about how great it would be. Yeah, under the auspices of an organization that thought he deserved to be there to begin with, which they clearly don't. Why would it won't work? It only works with the right kind of handshake, with the right kind of partnership, and whoever's fault it is, whether it's Diaz's fault or the UFC's fault or both of them, Danny, they have a hard time seeing eye to eye on a number of issues. Co-main's probably for the best, to be quite honest with you.
I agree, but man, I feel like not watching a Diaz-Poirier 5-round fight is kind of, I don't know. I mean, just imagine what that fight would look like 5 rounds and what it would look like 3 rounds. In my opinion, I think it's going to go to distance. Man, those last 2 rounds would be just fantastic.
Both guys are hard to finish. Both guys have, they're proven durable. You know what's interesting is I had a conversation with Chael Sonnen. He came on my radio show. He came on this show, but he came on my radio show as well. And he says he doesn't really like 5-round fights and thinks that they're bad, not necessarily for the fan, but for the fighters. And I mean,
it's 2 extra rounds of beating, you know?
Well, think about it. How many times has someone come out of a 5-round fight? And there's been plenty that came out unscathed.
Yeah.
But think about any good 5-round fight. Those people came out of that fucked up. Yeah. You think about something like a Carlos Condit versus a Robbie Lawler. You know, I just don't. Okay, Robbie Lawler got back on the winning track, but I don't think either of those guys were the same after that. I'm not here to call for the abolition of 5-round fights, but I have been rethinking them at least a little bit. I do wonder if they're bad for fighters. I'm not saying they are. I'm just saying I'm at least contemplating it more than I used to.
Well, it definitely are, but 5-round fights is one of those things that, like, you don't see. I don't want to say you don't see often, but you're not fighting, 5-round fights all the time unless you hold the belt and you're a title holder, or you're just getting back-to-back immediate rematches. So it is one of those things where it's like, the odd fight. So in this case, I would like to see this fight 5 rounds. Me personally, as a fight fan, and fighting's fighting. We know what fighting is about, which is hurting the body. So. Yeah,
but you got to have degrees to which you can allow things.
Yeah,
I don't know. I'm just thinking about it, but I don't have a strong opinion. But it was interesting.
Cool. So if Nate Diaz and Poirier stays co-main event, let's get to our next question, which addresses what should be the main event.
Fuck if I know. That's me breathing the last 2 interviews.
No, Luke Thomas. I am your Ryan Bader.
Hi, Luke. It's James here from Liverpool in the UK. I'm just wondering if you had any thoughts on what the main event is going to be of UFC 230. If Dustin Poirier and Nate Diaz are the co-main event, what would be the main event? Are they holding out possibly for a defense of one of DC's championships, or perhaps something else? Really interested in your views. Thank you. Bye.
The tough thing about this question is
everything.
Everything.
It's a good question, by the way. I appreciate the
man,
genetics.
like, how do you top Diaz? Like, McGregor tops Diaz, right? Like,
it won't. It won't top it.
Yeah,
it won't top it. It'll be a title fight, and in that sense, it will top it. Does that make sense? Like, only by stature and proximity to title.
I mean, whatever titles mean these days.
So it'll be Cormier against somebody. By the way, can I just
think Cormier gets in there?
I don't know. Can I tell you how baffling I find this John Jones scenario?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. I've made this point before, and there's a lot of people who just want to be mad at John forever. I'm not one of these guys. MMA is not better without John. I don't know how this is hard to understand. The sport is better when he's around. You can all say what you want. You ever seen his mentions on Twitter? People send him all kinds of nasty things about.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah, it's just whatever. You can all imagine. And look, as I mentioned before, some of the stuff he earned through his own irresponsibility, but some stuff is just gratuitous. Point being is, look, MMA is better when he's around. Fact. Like, when he's fighting, it's just a lot more interesting. The denials around this, you can take that shit to somebody else because they mean nothing to me. But I just find, how do we not have resolution about what's happened yet? I've spoken to his lawyer a long time ago. He didn't really give me a sense that resolution was imminent, but not far away. His manager has spoken a number of times about there being some kind of resolution. I don't know if they're waiting out the clock or if there's some kind of information we don't know and that maybe some kind of change is possible soon. Something about it just feels off to me. And my hope, I'll be very clear about it, is that he does, I don't know, get cleared is the right word, but whatever the punishment is, that it expires and that he becomes eligible to compete again. That is my hope. I don't know if that's what's going to happen. But Danny, don't you find, like, the fact that his manager, I think, has spoken a number of times saying, yeah, we're relatively close to some kind of a conclusion to these matters, and then we never actually get a conclusion to the matters. I mean, maybe there's information behind the scenes that makes things keep changing, but I don't know. It's a little weird, right?
Yeah, it is a weird situation. And from my understanding, John is not having a hearing, right? Like,
no, a hearing only happens in the event that you challenge it and it goes to an arbitration panel. There's no hearing.
Yeah, they're just waiting for a decision. So it's like, what is taking so long?
I do think, though, that it goes back and forth between his representatives and USADA. So maybe they're trying to work out a negotiated settlement or something.
It's been forever. It's been a while.
So my point is, if you could get him on there, well, forget it. I mean, it would be the king of all king returns. You know, it'd be great. But it's either going to be Cormier or they might do the Amanda Nunes fight if they don't put that in December, right? Against Cyborg, you could do that. But my guess is it's going to be an underwhelming main event relative to the co-main. And you could say, well, doesn't that mean the co-main should go above it? Right. They just don't see him that way, and they should see him that way. They just don't.
All right, let's move on to the next question. We're going to go for Khabib and Conor. Back to that.
Well, they love these questions, huh?
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Sean Stevens calling from Orlando, Florida. Question for October 6th. With Khabib struggling to make weight in previous weigh-ins or suffering with injury, do you think the UFC will have a backup? For example, Tony Ferguson coming out of injury at the moment, fit to fight again. Would they have him up as a backup since he is the interim title holder? Would that be able to replace Khabib on that card to fight Conor McGregor? Or would they have Dustin Poirier or Nate Diaz step in?
So basically what this... Yeah, that is his question. So basically what this gentleman's asking is, should the UFC have a backup for Khabib McGregor?
I don't think it's the worst idea, but recall he made weight no problem against Edson Barboza. He made weight no problem against, who was his last fight? Ally Quinta. He made weight no problem. Whatever those issues were, and they were real, they're not the same anymore. He has gotten his act together, right? It took a little while, but he got his act together, and he has not had a problem. So, like, out of an abundance of caution, I could understand it, but I would not equate this, although the history is bad, I would not equate this to the Darren Till situation because the Darren Till situation is one of recency. Literally, he missed weight in his last fight. I know there were extenuating circumstances, but Khabib has at least shown, yes, I've done wrong, and there's been times where I've badly cost the UFC, but there's reason to believe he also learned his lesson and has this now under control. I'm not saying Darren Till doesn't, but I am saying it's a little bit up in the air.
Yeah. I actually think it's a terrible idea to have a backup opponent.
By the way, there is no backup opponent. You can throw in Diaz. Yeah, it's not the same as Khabib versus Conor. There, in that sense, Danny, there is no replacement.
Right, but I don't think there should be a replacement in case either or falls out. I don't think anybody should be plugged in. unless maybe like if McGregor falls out, I think maybe then it makes sense just because, you know, Khabib is still the champion, and I do think the title should be defended. So maybe a Dustin Poirier could step in there.
Yeah.
But the other way around, if say Khabib were to drop out, I'm not, you know, supporting the idea of having a backup, because what if Conor loses, or you never know, Conor gets injured. By just having a backup and making either guy fight, you could potentially lose that fight, and I think that's the biggest fight the UFC could ever.
Yeah.
You know,
Also, in fairness to Conor, remember he was supposed to fight Jose. Jose falls out, and then to bring in Chad Mendes, and he had to fight that guy. Now he won, but you know the guy has give credit where credit is due. He's stepped up a number of times for people that just didn't. Remember, he's supposed to fight Cole Miller in Ireland, and ended up with being Diego Brandao and everything else. Yep. And you could say they all went his way. That's not the point. The point is he didn't know that. He just took the fight anyway. Maybe he doesn't have to do that anymore. So
yeah, I think he's best.
Yeah, okay.
All right, now let's move up to the heavyweight division. Let's talk about an individual that has been getting some criticism lately.
All right.
What's up, Luke? It's Adrian again from Corpus Christi. Third time I'm calling. I haven't been on the show yet. I wonder why. I don't know. I am a mouth breather, of course, and you are Donk. My question is, where does Francis Ngannou go from the Derek Lewis fight? I just saw Derek Lewis right now when I loaded it up. I've been training all morning. Anyways, where does Derek go? And, of course, they would do the GSP fight against Khabib or Conor. Come on.
All right.
No question.
I'm going to cut him right there. I'm going to cut him right there.
Yes. Well, he made the show finally. You made his day.
He made the show, so congrats.
Yes.
Let's talk about Ngannou. Where does he go next? I mean, this is a guy that he's been getting some criticism from Dana White, you know, from the fans as well. He's still obviously a big name in the division. I don't know exactly where he's ranked, probably #1 contender, but, you know, where does he go next?
Do you do a JDS rematch? Or has he fought JDS?
No, I don't think he has.
No, sorry. I'm thinking of somebody else. You could do that.
Yeah.
Because JDS is kind of sick. Because you look at the rankings, Volkov is at 5, but he's fighting Lewis at 2. Then you have Overeem. You know, they're not going to do that one right away. And then you have JDS. Now, Mark Hunt is locked up, right? I think for UFC Moscow, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I think he's fighting
Alexei Oleinik, right?
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yep.
So you could potentially do that, but he's got to get back on the horse, man. He's got to get back on the horse. And JDS might be the best opponent for him if you really consider it, because, yes, he has big power, but he fights a little bit more on the outside than he used to. He's a little bit more careful. He actually got thumped up a little bit more in his last fight against Blagoy Ivanov than I thought he was going to. He took a lot of damage, actually. So that's a possibility. But I had people telling me that when Ngannou came out with that message, and I don't begrudge him acknowledging that he was afraid. Like, we've had these debates about cornering all the time. I don't know where you came down on the Pennington situation. I'm sure her corner are not bad people, but this argument that, well, someone's corner is best situated to make these choices for their health, it's like, well, you're best situated in the net sense. Certainly you're better situated than Danny, you're better situated than me, but you're not infallible. And it turns out that these people and their coaches believe in these fighters so much that they will send them back out there to scenarios where they don't really have much of a chance of winning, and they end up getting and taking extra abuse. And I don't think MMA, I've seen very good coaches and otherwise very good corners make these kinds of choices much more regularly than you do in boxing, but it carries consequences. Like, in the end, it's only Francis that has to worry about this. No one else, his corner doesn't have to worry about this at all. So in the end, a roundabout way, you know, I don't know. You want to go to the back of the division a little bit? You could give him Tai Tuivasa. Maybe if Arlovsky wins at UFC Moscow, maybe there's a rematch there or something. Somebody who's potent, but maybe, you know, less than the very top of the division. But, you know, we need to have a real conversation about cornering in MMA. It's not good, and the not good cornering is often done by people who are very capable coaches and loving people otherwise. Yeah. That's the scary part about it.
Yeah. This was a weird one because I don't know if the UFC is still in the Francis Ngannou business. We knew, like, on his rise, they were like, yo, this is the next guy, and they were investing a lot of assets, you know, promotionally wise, you know, getting his name out there. And I don't know if that's the case anymore, but I would like the UFC to have some sort of rebuilding path with Ngannou. I think this is a guy that speaks to a market that a lot of heavyweights don't. And, you know, physically, he's huge. He's a very imposing figure. You can sell the whole heavyweight allure, right? And, you know, at the end of the day, if you look, besides the Derek Lewis fight, man, he was always showing up and knocking people out. So I think there needs to be some rebuilding going on. I like the Tai Tuivasa fight in the sense of, you know, it's a fun fight to contemplate. But, man, Tai Tuivasa is a pretty legit striker.
Yeah, maybe you go back further. Maybe he needs
I think he needs a confidence booster. Yep.
A tune-up fight.
Yep. I think that's exactly what he needs. Who knows if the UFC will give him that, though. Right?
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's move on to your favorite TV show.
Okay.
Hey, this is David from Anaheim calling. My question is about the Ultimate Fighter. I know in the past the UFC has really wanted to take control of the production, and I thought they were going to give it away to ESPN with this new deal, but that recent interview Dana White did about they're building a gym right next to their current headquarters makes me kind of double think if they're going to give away the production control with ESPN with this new deal. Just wanted to get your thoughts on it as well as Danny's. Thank you for taking my call, Luke. Bye.
So first of all, how surprised are you that Tough is continuing? Because like I think MMA media, we're all like, oh yeah, like going to ESPN, this thing's done, right?
Yeah. I don't care. I don't give a fuck at all. Can I just be clear about that?
We're talking about your favorite TV show. Come on.
The thing is, here's the truth. Here's the truth about this. When I first saw this news, I was like, I'm ready to rage. And then I thought about it and I was like, it's going to be one thing I just don't watch. Yeah. There's lots of TV shows I just don't watch. Now, how smart is it for the UFC to say, you know, pick and choose? And then, I mean, don't be surprised when you succeed with a strategy where I just start choosing a lot, which I think is a bigger problem than just the Ultimate Fighter. But okay, like I can't pretend to be upset, Danny. I'm just not going to watch.
Yeah.
So I don't really care, to be honest. What's the other part of the question? Like, about the production?
Yeah, production.
The question is, who does MMA better, ESPN or UFC?
Yeah.
You know, and on some level, I'm just like, well, UFC does better. That means more editorial control on broadcasts and things they don't want getting out, not getting out, but you know, MMA journalism generally gets those kinds of things out. They're better, the UFC, than they used to be about being forthcoming about those kinds of things. So if it means a better broadcast in the end, which means it's better for the sport, yeah, okay, I can live with it, I guess. Mm-hmm.
I agree with you in the sense that the UFC obviously knows how to like work MMA better than ESPN, but if ESPN does manage to get a hold of the production of Tough, I mean, they will change some things around. It won't be the exact same show. It won't have the same feel. I think if Tough is going to stick around and they're planning on, you know, keeping it, I think it needs some refreshment. I think it needs something new. So yeah. maybe ESPN can offer that.
I don't care.
All right.
Have I made that clear? I just can't tell if I've made that clear or not.
So it's 2:02. Do you want to answer another one?
Yeah. We got time for a couple more.
Okay, cool. Let's talk about the divisions in the UFC. And this caller was really riled up, I got to say.
All right.
Hey, it's Aussie Sexbot here, obviously from Australia. Yeah, I'm a little bit pissed off with these divisions. I don't know how hard it is to fix these divisions with all these weight-cutting issues. I just want to... How hard it is just fucking fix these divisions. All you got to do, just add a division in the middle. One division fixes it. 165, 175, just scrap the 170 division. Whatever the bloody Tyron Woodley, Darren Till, whoever the fuck it is, when they move up, move down, whatever they want to do, they don't have to weight cut. It's all good. Whatever they do, change it to super lightweight, super welterweight, whatever it is, 185, then add a 205, and then add a 225, add a cruiserweight, and then you got an open heavyweight division. The two divisions, that's all you got to add. What are your thoughts? I'm done. Out. Peace.
All right, so he's done, and he was also kind of pissed off. What are your thoughts on adding more divisions? I don't think you're a big fan of that, right?
Yeah, I mean, you can add as many divisions as you want. Just be ready for more bad MMA, and it would not solve the weight cutting problem. It might make a dent in it, maybe even significant contribution, but it wouldn't get rid of it. And now you just have to live with, I mean, it's just amazing how much MMA used to reject the trimmings of boxing, and now it can't dive headfirst into them quicker. I made this point in the live chat when I was still doing it. MMA is like slowly becoming boxing, where it's like, if you want to add a 165-pound division, okay, yeah, you can still have a decent 155 and a decent, what would then be a 175. You can do all that. The notion of a cruiserweight division sounds like a ghastly, terrible idea. Also, I'm always skeptical, Danny, always. When someone says, like, I have a solution to this incredibly complex set of problems. All you have to do is X, right? People will say, oh, look at what one did for hydration testing. It has fixed weight cutting. Well, it fixed weight cutting in a part of the world where weight cutting was not nearly as big a deal. How do we know that that's directly attributable to their hydration testing? It might, in fact, it might actually be. I'm not saying that it's not. I'm just asking. People in MMA do this shit all the time, where they're always like, well, X did Y to solve the problem. How do you know that that actually solved it? How do you know it's not another series of complicated factors that all work together? How do you know that the problem is even solved? So I grant that they have less weight cutting happening, drastic weight cutting anyway, inside one. But where is the data publicly available that shows and definitively proves that it was a hydration test and they got it done? I'm a do you understand? I'm in favor of hydration testing. But anytime anyone always says, here is all you have to do is the X solution, you should always be very, very skeptical.
Yeah, I mean, I'm actually a fan of maybe adding a 165 division.
I could live with 165.
But man, the heavyweight division is so thin. Imagine splitting it into two.
Yeah.
That'll look pretty ugly.
I'd rather die.
Yeah, that'd be terrible. But the 165 is interesting for me. I do think it'll solve some of the weight cutting issues because, hey, it's hard to force somebody from 155 to 170 because, man, that's a big jump. It's like if you're telling somebody, no, you got to go up. I mean, you could literally change their entire career, right? Because that's a different type of competition. Now, if it's 165, that's not that bad. Just fight guys that are just a tad heavier, maybe even your size if you're missing weight at 155. So I believe it could solve some of the weight cutting issues. Some, yeah. And also, man, let's talk about the matchmaking. The 155 and the 170, especially the 155, is a logjam. I mean, creating a weight class where some of those top contenders can get title fights in another weight class, that definitely would make everything a bit smoother, and we wouldn't have, top guys. Nobody would be, all riled up saying Dustin Poirier is not getting a title shot and all this and that, So I think it'll solve that as well, and also create room for super fights, which I'm a big fan of. Imagine 165 of champion.
You are drastically overstating what a super fight is when you talk about doing that.
I mean, champion versus champion, isn't that a super fight?
Not if the fight itself is not super. No, it could just be a champion versus a champion. Why?
Oh, bigger fights, which that's what the UFC.
I think you keep adding titles, you keep watering the product, and you will see that quickly.
I mean, I think if you add another weight class, it's also, the UFC should have less incentive.
Here's what everyone wants.
Wait, let me finish.
Okay.
The UFC would have less incentive to make all these interim belts,
They would have more incentive to create interim belts.
No, because what's the reason why they're pulling fighters to headline pay-per-views and putting up interim titles is because the champions that they need to fight in those headlining slots are not available.
They will take their resources and maximize it to the nth degree to put product behind it. You guys think if you add another title, it would relieve pressure. No, it would just enable them to add more. That's what they keep doing. They keep taking their resources and pushing it to the ultimate max. Here's my point. I can acknowledge, Danny, that there are benefits to adding a division and that it wouldn't be 155 and 175. It wouldn't drain them so terribly because that's the real sweet spot. I grant that. But fans of that also need to acknowledge there are downsides. It's not one or the other. There are some positives, yes. There are some downsides, and you have to reconcile that. You have to figure out what matters more to you.
Yeah.
All right, lastly. One last one. We got to get out of here because I have to get uptown and do 3 hours of radio.
This is not a question. This is the ultimate mouth breather. From here on is downhill. So I think after I play this, the next couple shows we'll take a rest from the mouth breather.
All right.
Because this is just off the charts.
All right, let's hear it.
And I'm not going to even play the whole thing.
Please don't.
It's just too much for
We don't have time. That is awesome. All right. Does he talk? That's it?
No. I'll stop it right there. But, man, face the pain and mouth breathing.
You know what? He's basically topped out the art form.